good day, everyone. And I want to start once more with the word of gratitude and how impressed I am that so many of us here at St. George's are engaged in this small group curriculum this fall, the Essentials, studying the Gospel according to Mark. By now, you've heard some excellent teaching from my clergy colleagues, and I'm just privileged to join them in helping us all open up again the Gospel according to Mark, opening up again the revelation of who Jesus Christ is. And the portion of Mark's Gospel that we're going to be looking at in this session is absolutely critical to the entire narrative shape of Mark's Gospel. So we're going to be looking at chapter 8, verse 22 through the next two chapters, 8:22 through chapters 9 and 10. And I'm going to highlight some things that I really want us to be noticing and catching, because this is what we would call a hinge moment in the story. Here things begin to turn, and turn irrevocably, about the unveiling of who Jesus is and what he means for the world. So specifically, we are coming to the very end of Jesus' Galilean ministry. And you will note that this section of the gospel, I think you could argue that it is the central section. It's literally central in the middle, but also central to understanding how all of it fits together. It is framed by two healing stories. And what kind of healing? Healing of blindness. This is really important. It's a theme woven subtly through Mark's Gospel, but quite explicit in these two healing stories. The first that we come to, again, beginning in 8:22, is the healing of a blind man in Bethsaida. And what's striking about the story is that Jesus is required to lay his hands on the man twice. The first time he sees somewhat, and then Jesus lays his hand on him a second time and he sees clearly. And this is meant to represent all of us. And certainly it is representative of who the disciples are. They can see something very unique and special in Jesus that leads them to want to follow him, but they do not yet see clearly with 20/20 spiritual vision who he is as the Savior of the entire world. So we move then, again, out of the Galilean ministry of Jesus, and he takes his disciples far to the north to a region called Caesarea Philippi. It's absolutely beautiful up there, the mountains of the far northern Galilee, just at the base of Mount Hermon. Caesarea Philippi is actually a pagan temple, and it is here that Jesus takes his disciples away on retreat, and he asks them, "Who do people say that I am?" They answer literally correctly, in the sense that he is the one sent by God. And yet Jesus then begins to say, in effect, you don't know how right you are. So we conclude the Galilean ministry, and Jesus takes his disciples geographically out of Galilee, far to the north, to a place called Caesarea Philippi. I've actually been there half a dozen times, and it is absolutely beautiful. Jesus takes his disciples away on retreat before turning southward back to Jerusalem in the climax of the gospel. But while there, and in the vicinity of a pagan temple, Jesus asks his disciples, who do they think that he is? And it is here that Jesus launches into the first of what will be three predictions of his looming rejection and crucifixion in Jerusalem. The first is rejected by Peter. Peter rebukes Jesus, and you'll recall Jesus therefore rebukes Peter. You have no part in me. You are Satan if you reject God's will for how I will work out the plan of salvation through my crucifixion. Peter can't quite see at all how this could be. Again, the theme of blindness. Again, in chapter 9, Jesus foretells his looming crucifixion to all the 12, and we're told in chapter 9 that the disciples did not understand what he was talking about. They just didn't understand how that could be possible, that the death of a common criminal in this most ignominious way on the cross could possibly be a part of God's plans for the world, for our good. couldn't possibly see how that could be so. And then lastly, again, in chapter 10, Jesus foretells his crucifixion. Immediately thereafter, two of his closest confidants, James and John, are arguing about privileged seats in his coming kingdom. They clearly didn't see at all what he was talking about, worried about status and privilege in the coming kingdom when Jesus is talking about the cross. So we had these three predictions, and as you may know, in the Bible, threes are also a motif, a triad, if you will, of completion, often through trial. And here again, we see importantly that Jesus predicts his crucifixion three times. But in the midst of all of this, we have another unique story that only happens once in the gospel, and that is the story of the Transfiguration, where Jesus, again alone with his disciples, takes them up a mountain, and we're told that he is transfigured. And the disciples themselves are enveloped in this cloud of glory, of transcendence. And it's as if here we have crossed over the boundary between heaven and earth. And the voice of God speaks that this is my son. Listen to him. What he's telling you about who he is and what must happen to him, he is right, and you can follow him. Again, I've been to this part of the world, and it is beautiful. And it's occurred to me that it would be entirely natural for Jesus and his disciples to say, it's beautiful here. We're kind of away from all the rabble, from all the problems of the world. Let's just linger here. But we have this glimpse, this glorious manifestation that's mystical about who Jesus is, and it is precisely as we come out of that this transcendent one, Jesus, goes down and returns to Jerusalem, to the cross. So the transcendent Jesus Christ is the one who suffers and dies for us as the servant of all humankind. So this is what forms the center of Mark's gospel, and everything that will happen from this point forward will tell the story of how his crucifixion will unfold and how we will be given sight to see that actually this is precisely the means by which God redeems humanity and saves us. One last thing I would ask that you pay attention to in these verses, these chapters, is the cast of characters that Jesus encounters. Obviously, there's a lot of engagement with his own disciples. There's engagement with self-righteous Pharisees, people who are possessed by demons. He welcomes little children. The whole gamut of humanity represented in these chapters of Mark's gospel. I'm thinking particularly of the distraught father who comes to him with the boy who's sick and presumed to be possessed by a demon. The boy is not his illness. The boy is not the demon. They are stronger. They are more powerful than the boy, but they're not more powerful than Jesus. And it is precisely into all of that, for all of these cast of characters, representative of all of us, that Jesus comes. You might just say it as simply as this: all real love, all godly love takes the pattern, takes the shape of the cross. It comes all the way down to the bottom, all the way down to the worst, all the way down to our sin and even to our death. So I might conclude by simply saying that as for the disciples, Jesus predicting that if you want to continue to follow me, this is what you're in for. This is how it's going to unfold. It's going to unfold not here up in the beautiful mountains of northern Galilee, but at the foot of the cross down in Jerusalem. You should know what you're in for, and you should understand that this is precisely how God has chosen not only to reveal his ultimate character and purposes for the world, but to fulfill them. So these chapters represent, if you will, our Rubicon crossing. And I wonder if we can see that and if we have the courage to follow still.